Today, we're going to talk about the role of the costume designer and how costume designers make artistically appropriate decisions. Costume designers start with the script. They have to read the script. They have to understand styles of theater, styles of writing, but then they listen to the director. So there also has to be an understanding of styles of direction and styles of acting. Once they've accumulated all of that information, the first thing they need to think about is the environment of the play. By using the principles and elements of design, which we'll be talking about, designers, lighting designers, costume designers, scenic designers, sound designers, hair and makeup designers use those elements and principles to create the idea of where the action is taking place. For example, the image on the left is from the play K2. It looks cold, whereas the image on the right from a production of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is much warmer. It's taking place in a warmer climate. The colors of the costume are warmer. The colors of the scenery are warmer. The colors of the lighting are warmer. So they use those techniques and those tools that they have. So it's not just that one person is appearing in just an undershirt and somebody else is appearing in a parka, but if you look at the overall atmosphere, we've created an environment. They also can tell you something about the nature of the characters. By using particularly the element of line, we can make somebody look soft or hard. And someone who looks hard tends to look mean, whereas someone who looks soft looks non-threatening. So the type of fabric that we use helps to create the line of the character, which will tell us something about the nature of the character. Also, color will tell you something about the nature of the character. Do they look friendly or do they look mean? A friendly character might have a softer pastel color, whereas a mean character will have a very strong color, be that black or red or a dark blue or a dark green. It'll be dark. We can also tell something about the relationship of characters when you have multiple characters. So on the upper right-hand side, this is a production of West Side Story. Most productions of West Side Story, and also the one on the lower left, Romeo and Juliet, tend to create two sides. You have the two warring families, you have the two warring gangs. Very obviously, in the upper right one gang tends to focus on the black color with red, and the one on the right focuses on a khaki color with some red in it. The red is unifying for the two, but the khaki and the black set them apart so that you can tell who's on which side. In the Romeo and Juliet, there's a blue and a red, and that is very common because then they dress Romeo and Juliet in purple, which is a combination, as we know, if you mix blue and red together, you get purple. So it's a way that a costume designer can show how are we related. Oh, these people are opposites, but these people are a blending of it. In the upper left photo, what we have is we have a master and servants. They're all in the same color palette, and they all actually have blue and white stripes. But the master has more white in the costume, and the servants have more solid blue in their costume. But we can tell that they belong together because they are similar enough. Particularly used in musicals and large scale productions such as that In the bottom right, we have a production of War and Peace. Well, you'll notice it's a period piece. And so we're looking at about 1805 to 1814. But what you'll see is that the color of trim on the women's dress matches the color of the vest on the men. Everybody's dressed in essentially the exact same thing, but you can tell who is supposed to dance with who in the musical scene because they match in color. They do this all the time in musicals. The girl in the yellow skirt dances with the guy wearing the yellow vest and the yellow tie. There's the pink couple and the blue couple and the orange couple. It just gives you a way of telling who belongs to who by using color, no matter what time period you are working in. Costumes can also help with creating dramatic emphasis. In the image on the upper left, you'll notice that everybody in the picture is dressed in beige and tan, and then suddenly a person in bright blue walks in. That is dramatic emphasis. Something important is going to happen. Combining with lighting, you can make something extremely important, somebody stand out, somebody look different. And then sometimes costumes are just costumes. They're part of the environment. This is a Bob Mackie design here on the right for Elton John. They had an idea they wanted to get across, but they weren't trying to relate something that told a story. They were trying to relate something that was simply spectacular, which is also a way of doing costume design. The style of the show. Now, each of these renderings, and we call this a rendering, it's a visual representation. We render what the costume will look like. You'll notice that each rendering itself has a different style to it. Which of the plays is dark and moody? Which of the plays is light and whimsical? We have 3 different time periods represented here. We actually have 3 different cultures represented here also. But the style of the rendering, the style of the clothing tells us something about what is going to be happening on stage. A musical set in the 1930s is different from, say, a Moliere play set in the 1600s. They could be dressed similarly, but even dressed similarly, the style of acting and the style of directing and the style of the language is different. And so the clothing matches those stylistic choices. Time period. Clothing tells us a lot about the time period. If we have a blank black stage with a couple of black boxes and someone walks on stage, we generally know they're now or they're some other time based on the clothing that they are wearing. Research and the history of clothing becomes very important for costume designers. Are you working on a play that it's important the audience sees that time period? Is it important that they know exactly that the year is 1917? Or is it just important that they know it's long ago? There will be people in the audience who are experts and know every mistake that you made in representing your time period. And there will be a lot of people who will think that you did a play set in olden times. Remember, when we're doing costume design, we are not doing historical reenactment. We are looking at a time period and we are picking and choosing specifics from that time period to represent the story that we are telling. And that story that we are telling may not require everything that's accurate about the time period. It may only need a few things from that time period in order to express what it is that we are trying to say. So a costume designer will put together some research, oftentimes in collaboration with the dramaturg, to give to the cast so that they understand the shapes that they'll be wearing, because rehearsing in a t-shirt and a pair of leggings is different than rehearsing in a corset and a hobble petticoat. A hobble petticoat means that you can't take large steps. It hobbles you, just like hobbling a horse. So I keep mentioning the elements and principles of designs. We have a specific course that talks about and where you learn how to use and manipulate the elements and principles of design. In costume design, when you're just beginning, we start with line. Line is the silhouette, the outside edge. But your line can be a curved line or a straight line, so it takes shape and form. You can have a period costume that is smaller or larger, so working with mass. We work a lot with texture because fabric has different textures, and different textures will tell us things. A shiny texture versus a dull texture will usually tell us who the flashy or rich character is versus the poor character. We've already spoken quite a bit about how costume designers use color to give information about characters. We've also talked about the principles of unity and variety. Unity would be all of the actors on one team or family having Black accents and the other team having khaki accents. That gives unity to that team or family unit. Variety, when we showed that picture of the master and servants, they were all in blue and white, but there was a variety. They were all in blue and white stripes of some sort, but there was a variety. Some were horizontal, some were vertical. Okay, so those are the principles of how we work with color, texture, line to create these costumes. So those are all things that we work with. Now, accessories. Why talk about accessories? When we build costumes, yes, we are building them for a specific production of a specific show. But we're also thinking, how can this be used again? Because clothing is very expensive and period clothing is even more expensive. So we like to know that things will be able to be used again. For example, doublets. Here is an example of a Cavalier early 17th century period doublet. That doublet could probably be used in an Elizabethan play also. Now, if you're being historically accurate, they could not. But if you're being historically general, the accessories that you add to the costume are going to tell us something specific about the time period. So we can make a dirndl skirt, which is a skirt that just has a gathered waist. And based on the shape of the bodice and what jewelry we put with it, the accessories, what's the shoe, what's the shape of the apron, we're going to be able to place that skirt in many different time periods. The same thing goes with men's shirts, with doublets. So by using a baldric or bandolier, which is the belt that hangs from the shoulder, having the sword hang from the shoulder instead of the waist, the shape of the collar, the shape of the shoes, we can take that doublet and take it from an Elizabethan play to a Cavalier time period play. So our accessories are going to take that generic piece from our costume stock and make it specific to the play and character that we are working on. So how do we do all of this? This is just the beginning thought process. Costume design starts with the thought process, the reading of the play, the understanding of how to break a play down, how to do research, and then there's all this other work that has to happen. It's not just going into stock and pulling costumes, but it's how many people do you need? How much money do you need? How much fabric do you need? How much sewing are you going to do? What are you going to be able to buy? What are you going to be able to rent? What do you have in stock? What's the color going to be? How are you communicating that color to the scenic designer? How does it work together with scenery? How are you going to communicate to the lighting designer? How does that work with lighting? Do the actors need wigs? Are they going to wear microphones? Do they fly and have to have a harness built into their costumes? All of these things are part of what is going to happen. If you're going to build a costume, is it something that you can have an unskilled laborer build, or is it somebody who needs to know the principles of tailoring in order for the costume to look right? And who took the measurements so that the tailor can make that costume appropriately? And then, of course, getting the costume on stage. You have a wardrobe crew and you have laundry to do. And there are just many, many things that need to happen. And the costume designer is the beginning of that process. And then if they're fortunate, they have a team. Sometimes you are the team. Sometimes you have one assistant as your team, and sometimes you have 40 other people working on the production to get all of these jobs done. And that is the role of the costume designer.